And we are back at the True Crime Lounge. My name is Breezy. If you're watching this, then you successfully made it to part one of Don't Drink the Kool-Aid. So if you've been watching, then you know. At first I thought I was done, but I remember, oh yeah, I have more parts to this series, so I'm happy about that. But anyway, for those of you that are new here, hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications for more True Crime Lounge. Remember, this is your place for you. Um, so, we left off with the origins, and we're going to start with the violence that broke out. I'm excited. So let's get started with our Don't Drink the Kool-Aid Jim Jones series. And we will see you, and I will hopefully you stay till the very end. Because more people are leaving than have been expected, and due to the limited seating available in the small Cessna aircraft Ryan had chartered back to Georgetown, Ryan planned out sending a group there and staying behind with the rest of the members until the flight could be scheduled. Temple members Don Sly, acting directly under Jones, ordered the attack on Ryan with a knife. This was one of the series of orders that Jones gave that day, which had one or more of the loyalists taken drastic actions without any of the other loyalists knowing Jones's instructions, resulting in much of the conclusion between Temple members. In fact, when Sly attacked Ryan, other loyal members of the group had stopped the attack. Although the congressman was not seriously hurt in the attack, he and Dreyer realized the visiting party and the defectors weren't endangered. Ryan's party and 16 ex-Temple members left Jonestown and reached the nearby Port Katuma airstrip at 4:30 p.m. They planned to use two planes, a six-passenger Cessna, and a slightly larger Twin Otter to fly to Georgetown. Shortly before the scheduled departure, Jones' loyalist Larry demanded to join the group. Several others defected voiced their suspicion around the motives, but Ryan and Spear allowed him to join. Before the Cessna could take off, Layton produced a gun in the back of his head in his poncho. As he started shooting the passengers, he wounded Monica Bagby and Vernon Gosney as he tried to kill Dale Parks, who disarmed Layton. At this time, a tractor appeared on the airstrip, which was driven by members of Jones' armed guard in the Red Brigade. The tractor got about within 30 feet of the Otter, and then Jones' loyalists opened fire, circling the plane in apparently military-style formation. At the time, Congressman Leo Ryan shot dead along with four other journalists. A few seconds of shooting was captured on camera by NBC cameraman Bob Brown, whose camera kept rolling as he was shot dead. Congressman Ryan News members Brown, Robinson, and Harris and 44-year-old Jonestown defective Patricia Parks were killed in a few minutes of the shooting. Jackie Spayer was introduced by 5 bullets. Steve Sung and Anthony Katsaris, who were badly wounded. The Cessna was able to take off and fly to Georgetown, leaving behind a gunfire damaged Otto, whose pilot and co-pilot also flew out of Cessna. Journalist Tim Redman, who had stayed at the airstrip, photographed the aftermath of violence. Dreyer assumed the leadership of the scene at his recommendation, and Layton was arrested by Guyanese State Police. Dreyer was hit by one bullet in his buttock at the airstrip. It took several hours before the 10 wounded and other partly gathered themselves and spent the night at the cafe, was seriously wounded in a small tent on the airstrip. The Guyanese government plane came to evacuate the wounded the following morning. 5 teenage members of Parks and Bow families with one boyfriend were told by defector Joe Parks after shooting to hide in the adjacent jungle until help arrived, and their safety was assured. They went to the jungle but got lost 3 days and nearly died during where they were found by Guyanese soldiers. Many Guyanese soldiers were civilians and were looking alongside the airstrip. None of them attempted to intervene, and none of them came forward to offer witness testimony. To date, none of them have been identified. So what about the mass murder and suicide? Well, about 40 minutes after the Fort Katima shootings, which is how long it took to travel roughly 6-mile road back to Jonestown, the airstrip shooters arrived in Jonestown when one eyewitness, Tim Carter, a Vietnam War veteran, recalled them having 1,000-yard stare weary soldiers. The shooters number about 9, and their identities are not certainly known, but the sources agree that Joe Wilson, Thomas Kai Sr., and Albert Touchette were among them. Jim Jones was called to a meeting among the pavilion that night fell. It was announced that another white light, the fake suicide, would have been rehearsed before. But this time, Dr. Lawrence shot Nurse Annie Marie and others mixed cyanide and Valium into a metal vat full of grape-flavored aid. Before the mass suicide got underway, Jones argued with 2 temple members who actively resisted his decision for the congregation to die. One was a 60-year-old Christine Miller who repeatedly suggested alternative strategies such as taking all the children to Russia along with Jones himself. Another dissenter would certainly be Jones's own wife, Marceline. Jones assured the followers the CIA-sponsored mercenaries or Guyanese soldiers would soon emerge from the jungle and slaughtered them all. Loyalists with crossbears and firearms formed a circle around the area where the poison was being injected into the children's mouth and syringes in a paper cup. When the families were assembled and arrived to the head line, the children were poisoned first. This was suggested to be one of the reasons so many adults continued toward their own deaths with little or no resistance. Stephen Jones, surviving son of Jim Jones, asserted afterwards that it would not have been impossible to carry on living after so many children died. According to the eyewitness Stanley Clayton, the families were escorted away from the poison vat was located and told to lie down together along the sidewalks in the area. And was still being closed because anyone present who believed this be another rehearsal would not believe any longer. After seeing people conversing and dying, the poison extremely effective, causing death within 5 minutes of anyone who drank it. Four people who intended to be poisoned decided to not cooperate and survived. There were 76-year-old Hyacinthe Trash, who hid under the bed and with the nurses and was going to a dormitory with a cup of poison. 36-year-old Odell Rose, a Jonestown teacher and craftsman, who hid. 25-year-old Stanley Clayton, who also hid. 79-year-old Grover Davis, who was hard of hearing, so missing the announcement on the speaker, lay down in a ditch and pretended to be dead. Trasher and Davis were recovered by the Guyanese government on Sunday morning. Rose and Clayton left for Port Guyana. 5 people were given assignments by Jones and his staff that did not recall them to their deaths. His two lawyers, Charles Gary and Mark Lane, who were not the temple members, were escorted to the East House, which was used to accommodate visitors and far away from the pavilion. Tim Carter, Mike Carter, Mike Popes were given luggage containing money and documents in which they were told to deliver to Guyana's Soviet embassy. Lawyers Gary and Lane walked through the jungle during the night and eventually made their way to Port Katima. While in the jungle near the settlement, they heard cheering and gunshots. The observation concurs that with the testimony of Clayton, who was not taken seriously. Clayton was suggested the people of Georgetown no longer needed their rolls, tools, and equipment, and the father of Guyanese families then went to Jonestown as Clayton slept. He returned the next morning with a disturbed look on his face, according to Clayton. Evidently, Jones and his immediate staff, and having organized a supervised white night, came together and killed themselves and others with handguns after giving the final cheer. However, the only two people who were killed by gunfire were Jones and Annie Moore. It is unknown whether Jones shot himself or was shot by someone else, and Moore left a suicide note before the shooting himself in Jones' cabins. Recovery workers entering Jones's cabin found that the door was blocked by her body and the means of escaping was a slow death endured by followers. It is believed that his son Stephen, that Jim Jones chose to be shot rather than poisoned. Other non-suicide appeared to have poisonous brew injected into the blaze of known. Moore was only 7 people out of 913 to have an autopsy performed on her. At the existence of the family, her sister Rebecca Moore, who was not a People's Temple member, has since 1999 hosted a website about the disaster. Moore noted that in part stated, "I am at point, right, so embittered against the world." Another last note was left. The Carter brothers and Mike Probst were put into protective custody in Port Guyana, but released in Georgetown. Rose and Clayton and the 2 lawyers were also brought to Georgetown. Larry Layton, who opened the fire about Secessa, was extradited to the U.S. and put in prison. He is the only person to have ever been held responsible for the events at Jonestown. Sadly, and unfortunately, this guy got paroled in 2002. He needs to stay in jail, in my opinion. There's no evidence indicating that mercenaries of the Guyanese soldiers or anyone else were present at the jungle surrounding Jonestown on the evening of the mass suicide, as Jones has told the followers. What do you guys think? Do you think maybe these people could have got out if it wasn't for the fact that Jones had like this socialist role going over it and security and everything? I'm curious. Let me know in the comments what you think. I will see you next time with part 3. Y'all have a fabulous day.